Hello, good morning, and welcome to what is the first of a series that we're going to be presenting here on security, foundations of computer security. Thank you for attending this morning. This webinar will be recorded, and the video will be shared with you via email, also posted on the DigitalOcean YouTube channel and on the DigitalOcean community site at do.co/tech talks. So you'll be able to watch this after the fact if you have to leave for any reason, and or just want to watch it again because you love my presentation styles. If you have any questions, please type them in the questions box. We'll answer as many as we can live at the end of this talk. If we don't get to your question live, I'll answer it in like a long form Google Doc, and we'll send that out with the email with the video, or it'll also be on the Tech Talk page for this talk on the community page, and you'll also get a link to that in your email. So for those of you that are just not coming in, once again, this is Foundations of Computer Security. This is the first in a very long series of computer security videos that I will be covering. And who am I? Well, my name is Mason Egger, and I'm a developer advocate at DigitalOcean. If you have any questions for me or want to follow me on Twitter, I'm at Mason Egger on Twitter. I have a website. I do a live stream on Twitch, Coding with Mason. I do them Mondays and Wednesdays around lunchtime Central Time for me. If you have any questions, you can always email me. There's any way you can reach out to me. I will happily be able to answer your questions. So today, our webinar goals will be to learn about the history of computer security and why it's necessary, why we need security, and like why it wasn't necessarily built in at the get-go. We're going to discuss some very common threats that you may encounter. This will not be a comprehensive list because we could literally sit here till this time next year talking about all the different security threats that exist on the internet. This is going to be probably some of the most common ones, some of the ones that you would see taught to you in, say, boot camps or your typical security course or YouTube series. And then some suggested practices or common practices for protecting yourself, your employees, and your customers. So this talk is, if you've ever seen any of the talks that I've given, this talk is not like any of my other talks. This talk is a lot more, I don't want to say academic because that makes it sound snuffy, but we're going to be talking a lot. Like there's not going to be any live coding in this particular talk. Those will come in the later parts of the security talk. This is just a brief introduction of security and just some really useful practices that you can use at your organization to protect yourself. But one of the things that I always find is that not a lot of people really know the history of the internet in general and the history of computer security. And I'm kind of a history buff, so I like talking about it. So we're going to just briefly talk about some of the history. So the birth of the internet and the web, and it is to be noted that I'm going to be talking a lot about the World Wide Web, which will be known as www, or stuff that happens across HTTP or in the browser. There is so much more to the web than just your browser, just web pages. Email came long before the World Wide Web did. So we're not really going to be talking a lot about that. We're going to be talking a lot mostly focused around www, because as people who are building SaaS products and stuff, it's very likely that you're going to be dealing with this portion of the web. So the internet, as we know it today, started off as what is known as the ARPANET. It was the Advanced Research Projects Agency Network, and it was sponsored by the US military. It was a way of transmitting data. And the first original 4 nodes were at the University of California, Los Angeles, Stanford Research Institute, the UC Santa Barbara, and the University of Utah. As you can see in the picture, it's a little bit small, but the picture in the top left, those are the original 4 nodes of the internet. And as we go from there to 1970, we reach out to MIT, and I don't remember which other one is on the East Coast. And as you can see, the internet slowly grows. This becomes what we know as the modern backbone of the internet. All of this research, all of this stuff that was done is really what became the internet today. In 1969 was when the first original 4 computers were connected. And in 1975, the project was declared operational by the US government and was then put into production use. So the next thing that would happen would be that Sir Tim Berners would conceptualize the World Wide Web, www, in 1989 at CERN, while he was working at CERN. He was given time to work on it at CERN and started doing a whole bunch of research and actual implementation of modern internet and stuff. And this is where HTML, HTTP, and the URI, the Uniform Resource Identifier, during this time frame were created. In 1990, the first web page was served. And then in 1991, adoption began outside of CERN. Now, I find all of this interesting, just on a personal note, because we depend so much on the internet today. And as of up to this point, all of these things happened before I was born. So the internet is actually technically older than me. In 1993, the first web browser was released. It came out of CERN and people could start using it. In 1996, the web gets sophisticated. Flash expands capabilities, and this is what kind of brings flaws, bugs, and vulnerabilities into the internet at a larger scale. Embedded software, embedded scripts, a whole bunch of just flaws in the Flash ecosystem really did kind of start to lead the web into a more unstable path. And that's, again, it's the World Wide Web, not necessarily the internet. We will see in the next slides that the security of the internet came into question long before this. In 2003 is when internet data usage starts to skyrocket. More and more people are using the internet. More data was created in 2003 than the entire human history up to that point. It begins to alter business and commerce and all of these other businesses. It actually starts to finally take hit and start to change the way that we do things. And it's really interesting because I remember using the internet in 2003, and it's nothing like it was today. So the fact that it was beginning to change so much stuff back then, and then we think about how much we've changed since 2003, it's a little bit mind-boggling. And it just keeps growing. I could talk about this for hours. This is a really interesting conversation topic, but I'm going to go ahead and move on. So let's talk about cybersecurity, because you really can't talk about computer security and stuff without the internet networks without talking about cybersecurity. So in 1971, the first computer virus was actually created, which is actually really interesting. And it was the creeper virus, and it was sent around to infect mainframes. This was done within a lab. This is not actually out in the wild, but it was something that someone wanted to test to see if things could replicate. It is good to know that this marks the birth of cybercrime. So this was the first time that there had ever been any sort of malicious, or that we know of, malicious content happening throughout the internet and throughout mainframes. And then when they were done testing it, they actually wrote a program called Reaper to go in and remove all of the software from these infected mainframes. This is actually the very first antivirus. They created a virus that had negative impacts on a system, and then they wrote a program to remove it, thus creating an antivirus. So this is really all started back in the early 70s. In 1973, Robert Metcalfe warns that the network is way too easy to access from the outside, and that the internet is going to be an insecure place. Most of his warnings fall on deaf ears, and very little attention is paid to this kind of flag that was being raised in the 70s, because the internet usage in the 70s was fairly minimal, and not a lot of people really put that much thought into it at the time. Computer scientists attempt to incorporate encryption into TCP/IP in 1978. There are many hurdles they face along the implementation routes and just the amount of the overhead that it would create in a network to do these kind of things. But one of the biggest hurdles that they faced was the National Security Agency, which actively discouraged this kind of research, because apparently at this time it was still possible for the NSA to walk into classrooms and basically tell a professor, hey, you shouldn't really publish that paper. And it kind of worked, and we did not get encryption baked into TCP/IP back in the 70s, and it kind of fell out, which is kind of what leads to the fact that we have an insecure network as of today. In 1981, the elk cloner virus appears. I love the names, by the way, for computer viruses. People have amazing, imagination for some of these things. This was the first virus to appear since Creeper. And it was more and more viruses start to appear after this. So the 81 is when the influx of viruses really started to happen. Most of them were relatively simple, and you could just download a patch off the internet to fix your machine and you were fine. However, this is an important thing to note, because at this time companies started to begin forming that's main focus was the creation and fixing of patches, which means that this was the first companies that started to specialize in cybersecurity. These are companies that specialize in fixing viruses, thus giving birth to the cybersecurity industry. In 1987, the first documented case of removal of an in the wild computer virus was happened, so they were able to successfully mitigate an outside attack. In 1988, the Morris worm, which is a very, very famous one, this is actually the one that I learned about in school. I actually had never learned about creeper or elk cloner. The Morris worm was a virus that was used to first off, it was the first virus to spread very extensively in the wild. And it was actually written as not even really a virus. It was written to determine the size of the internet. And if I remember correctly, it used old Microsoft IIS web servers to exploit just like a known exploit or an exploit they had found in it to basically count the number of computers that were on the internet. Using security holes in SendMail and other Unix applications, web servers. I think I remember there being some IIS stuff, but I could be wrong on that. Don't quote me. But however, due to a programming mistake, not knowing how quickly this would replicate, this virus spread much faster than intended and interfered with normal operations. Actually started to degrade the operational capacity of the network. As it was doing this, it infected 15,000 computers in 15 hours, which back then was majority of the internet. So this was the first very wide-scale virus. In 1987 and 1989, cybersecurity companies such as McAfee, Symantec, Ultimate Virus Killer, I remember having that program, they all start to appear. We start to see all of this. In 1993, we see the first web browser released. Internet sees a very large growth, and this is also when we start to see the first robots, the first botnets, and the first dynamic denial of service attacks happening, because now that we have bots, we can do dynamic denial of service. Can't speak today. In 1996, phishing becomes a problem. Flash expands into the browsers, which, as we mentioned in our previous slides, Flash introduces animation, music, and other features into the browsers, making them a lot more fun and a lot more, interactive and stuff, but at the same time brings a lot of flaws, bugs, and vulnerabilities into them and starts to just like really mess things up. Adware and spyware become the tools of choice. In 2000, it's when it became clear that the data that we're using is much more valuable than the damage that they're causing to companies. Don't get me wrong, people still DOS people all the time, and people still try to do malicious things, but data theft and loss of data from your company, and not even necessarily, it could be customer data like credit card numbers and stuff, but identifying information, social security numbers, this data, the cyber criminals realize this is where the money is. So we start to see a lot more adware and a lot more spyware to start stealing our credentials, stealing our bank account information, social security numbers, personal data, all of that. In 2003, the internet adoption skyrockets, zero-day attacks come into the scene. So we start to see people that are researching the operating systems, researching the technologies, and attacking them literally without any sort of warning or anything whatsoever that there was going to be an attack coming. The amount of data that was created on or within the internet, as we said earlier, was more than that was created up to human history, and we really do see the alteration of commerce, business, and communications, and the basics of human interaction. We start becoming a more text-based society, a more chat-related society. In 2007, reports of 5.49 million unique malware were detected in that year alone. And then also we can say that cloud-based antivirus software did become a thing then. And then in 2010, this is going to be the last one on the list, the Pentagon's JSON project concludes that the internet is complex beyond modern understanding. And it really is, like, the decentralization of it is extraordinarily complex, and suggests a fundamental understanding of the science behind cybersecurity is needed. And this is kind of, I'm not going to say what gave birth to a lot of the modern cybersecurity movements, but this is kind of what kind of kickstarted a lot of the boom. And you see a lot more penetration testing companies start to pop up in the early 2010s and stuff like that. You start to see a lot more security-based startups showing up whenever we actually admitted that it was a threat. So that was fun for me. I spent a lot of time researching all of this. I guarantee you there's probably some events that I missed, but this is what I was able to come up with. And the security of it is really, or the history of it is really interesting, and we do need to be knowledgeable of how we got here and like where all this came from. And if not, at least hopefully it was a fun story for you. So the next part of this presentation that I'm going to talk about are going to be some common threats that you're going to face or that you will possibly see in your applications. This is not a comprehensive list of attacks by any means. Again, if I did a comprehensive list, we could talk for forever and a day. There's so much. These are considered to be some of the more common ones. These are the ones that you're going to see more people, like you're going to see more people talking about. These are the ones that are going to come up in Google searches really easily. So I classified them, and we're going to talk. The first ones we're going to talk about are injection style attacks. For people that are, if you're building a SaaS and web offerings, these are some of the more prevalent and the more dangerous that you have to be aware of. So SQL injection attacks. SQL injection attacks inject malicious database commands into your code and then execute arbitrary database code in your database, and could do potential things such as stealing data. It could destroy data. It could alter data. And this typically happens whenever you let someone enter in search fields into a form field, and then they basically escape out using like semicolon or something to pretend like it's an SQL command, and then write an SQL command, and then the program naively takes the code and then just executes that search, but then it has all of the code after the fact. So the mediation on SQL injection style attacks, making sure this kind of stuff doesn't happen. And you're going to see there's a theme with injection attacks. Sanitize your inputs and validate your data. Make sure that what you're getting is what you actually expect. By sanitize, I mean like escape out characters that would be potentially harmful, such as like the backslash or the single quote that would allow them to make the SQL thing think that it's done and then execute an arbitrary command. Usually, like I said, usually escaping special characters, or you can use prepared SQL statements to ensure that input is parameterized. So you can have the SQL statement prepared, and then you can parameterize in the few little inputs that you need and run that. Code injection is essentially when you inject malicious code which can execute within operating systems. This is similar to SQL injection as it is an injection attack, but instead you would inject either some bash commands. You might be able to inject just raw binary nastiness in there, and this would do stuff that would basically lead to privilege escalation or some sort of like getting control of the underlying server that runs the machine. And all they have to do is a little bit. If they can inject code and then break in and then somehow get a root shell, which I've seen done before, then all your data is theirs. All of your code is theirs. Some mediation for these are, you again sanitize your inputs. You're going to find that's a very common theme. Once again, usually around escaping special characters that can lead to injection. As long as you don't allow for arbitrary code to be executed and that your data is properly validated, that will stop all injection attacks. The last one I'm going to talk about real quick are cross-site scripting attacks, which is an injection of arbitrary JavaScript into legitimate websites, which is then executed in the victim's browser. So you can you could use this to make a alert show up. You could use this to steal cookies. You could use this to pretend that you are someone else and steal their data or steal their login credentials and do actions on their accounts as if you were them. And we're going to have an entire webinar on these attacks, how they are performed. I'm actually going to do some like live coding and demonstrate them, and then how to mediate them. So I know I'm going a little bit broad across today. Tune into future webinars for that. And for mediation, again, sanitize the input and escape dynamic data before inserting it into HTML, because if not, then any arbitrary JavaScript code could run and do some pretty nasty things. So the next set that we're going to talk about is credential stealing. And you're gonna find pretty much that this is a very prevalent and a very bad form, because with injection attacks, if your code is vulnerable, you can change the code, and it may only be vulnerable in one spot. It may not be that bad, but getting someone's credentials could all attacks are bad, but could potentially be a lot worse. So phishing, which is essentially pretending to be a legitimate entity and convincing the user to input sensitive data. So this would be, we've heard of these examples such as emails where someone will click a suspicious link And then they can steal the look, will take them somewhere, and it will basically execute some sort of JavaScript or something that could steal cookies, steal credentials. It could download a file onto your machine in the background that then maybe auto executes or something. It could do a lot of that. A lot of the ones that you'll see, if you ever see like your bank has a banner up top like, we will never contact you or email you about this or asking for this. That's kind of what these are, is that they pretend to be other people to get you to click on their link. Some of them are really bad and it's very obvious that they're phishing attempts. Some of them are very, very crafty and they get through. But you have to be very wary of them. With phishing, vigilance is basically the only way to get around phishing. Spam filters can also kind of help. Always verify where you're inputting your data into. If you click on a link in an email, when you look at the URL bar, make sure that URL looks like what it should be. If it's wellsfargo.com, make sure it actually says Wells Fargo. Maybe it's Wells Fargo with a Z or something. You're like, well, that's not right. If you see something like that, it's probably fishy. At least it needs more investigation into. So you just have to be vigilant, and you have to make sure that you don't, really and truly links and emails are a risky thing. So I would just say be wary of that. The next type that we can talk about is brute force attacks. So this is one that a lot of people see. This is the one that gets the most prevalence in Hollywood. And by the way, as someone who worked in cybersecurity, all of these hacker movies, all of these things where they're doing weird things, people that work in cybersecurity, whenever a new one comes out, we all gather around someone's desk and we laugh at how completely unrealistic and it's just that they're not real. So I could go on about that for a while. Brute force is basically attacking the most, basically just like, I'm going to try every combination and we're going to hope that we get through, randomly guessing passwords. It really is the most brutish of attacks. It's really not. If you have, your website has to be relatively poorly designed to even be susceptible to this type of attack. Mitigation for these are relatively easy. So for brute force attack, it's all about being able to do a large number of guesses in a small amount of time. So I need to be able to do 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 guesses a second. And if that doesn't work, then it completely foils my entire operation. So one of the easiest mitigations against a brute force attack is slow down the rate at which people can log in. If somebody fails an attempt, make the login wait time before they can submit another one 2 seconds. From a human standpoint, a human would never notice that. Maybe they would if they're super fast, but it would be very unlikely that they would notice that on a front-end browser trying to log in at 2 seconds. But if we're doing 10,000 requests a second, and now I can only do one request every 2 seconds, then the attack time that it takes to guess all of these passwords went up exponentially. And now it's essentially you and your children and your children's children and their children will long have since departed this planet because of how long it would have taken to brute force that attack or to get into that password. So slowing it down can be a great thing. Locking accounts after a certain amount of guesses, within a certain window, is another great way to do it. Or if you can see that there's a single IP that's just hammering you, ban the IP. Don't even bother with it. Brute force, while we like to think that it's a large scale threat, I would say that it's not as big a threat as you would think it is. Not a lot of bad things happen via brute force, at least on the password side. More of the time, it's buffer overflow attacks and other security vulnerabilities in code that lead to this. The next type of attack is dictionary attack, which is basically attempting to gain access using a pre-computed list of likely or common passwords. Basically, there's a list every year that comes out of the most common passwords every year, and you can guarantee these are in a dictionary attack. And that what they're going to do is they're going to try to guess every person. Now, the thing is that when a dictionary attack is executed, they don't say, okay, I'm going to log into Mason's account, and we're going to try this one, this one, this one, this one, this one, this one, and then, oh no, the locking mechanism has come in because I guessed too many times. So what it does is it will take this common list of passwords, and then what it does, instead of doing all of them at once on one person, it will try every person in the company. It's a horizontal attack. Somehow it will basically gather the amount of data, gather who works at your company or who works at your startup or whatever, gather all their email addresses and just say, was it Mason? Is it Samantha? Is it Chris? Is it Daniel? Is it Kamal? No. And then once it gets all the way through the list, it goes to the next one and starts over because it slowly moves through the list. And as it does it, the timeout for your locking will expire. and then it just becomes a blip in somebody's radar that nobody's really noticing. A lot harder to detect than just a typical brute force attack. It could also be random dictionary words or popular phrases, things like that. So mitigation to this, again, is slowing down the rate. Make sure you have some sort of intrusion detection system if they go horizontally. If you see a lot of people failing logins for a long time, that's a warning of a dictionary attack. And again, if you see ban IPs and stuff, if you see all of these login attempts coming in from the same IP, that's a little bit fishy. Maybe you should ban that IP. And then the last one is arguably the most effective one. This is the one that in reality, while these are some very common attacks, and dictionary attacks also include rainbow table attacks, but I'm not going to cover that today. This is the social engineering is really the one that will get you the most. These other attacks are common and they need to be taken seriously, but what needs to be taken most seriously is social engineering, and which is essentially manipulating people so they give up confidential information. People are always the weakest link in your security plan. Like, you can have the most secure system in the world, but that one night operator who has his password is going to be the weak link, and they will find a way in through that. People are always the weakest link. When it comes to social engineering, you have to be hyper vigilant, not only at work, but in your personal life. I go on little mini tirades about this all the time to my family because I see them participating in these. How well do you know me? Tell me what was my first concert that I went to? Who was my first grade teacher? What street did you live in? And they like post all these and see how many your friends you know. Yes, that sounds like a fun idea. It sounds like a great thing for all of your friends to be able to learn a bit more about you. But you know who's also learning a lot about you? The hackers. You know what are the most common security questions that are given to reset your password? What street did you go to? What was your first concert? Who was your first teacher? What was the first vehicle you drove? We have done such a great job of giving away information that would have only existed in our heads, and just putting it on the public internet so anybody can see it, and then we wonder why we get hacked. And that's what's going to happen a lot, is that these kind of quizzes, this kind of stuff, and then that's just easy social engineering. If you have someone who has time to study you, read your LinkedIn, read your profiles, maybe read a blog, as they can build a profile more and more about you and essentially guess your password, because they will be able to figure out exactly what's going on. So social engineering is a difficult one to face on many challenges. Don't do those how well do you know me, or these are the states that I've been to, or any of those weird like little let me post all of my qualifying security information on my Facebook page so that way everybody knows it, because that's how you're going to get your accounts compromised. At least that's how you're going to get the password stolen. We're going to talk about ways to protect it in the next section. And the mitigation level for this is literally just vigilance. You got to know when people are trying to get information from you. Okay, the last set of attacks that we're going to go over today are going to be network-based attacks. So sniffing. A sniffing attack is basically an attacker analyzing the network data stream. They are reading, monitoring, capturing full packets of data and analyzing them. If these packets were unencrypted, then all of the valuable information that's being passed between them can be seen. Secrets, valuable data, all of that now is theirs. Sniffing can be both active and passive. The user could choose to just use a sniffing attack just to steal the data, but they could also manipulate the data. Maybe they see an example is they could be seeing a data transfer or like a bank account transfer from me to another account. They could see any bank account transfers, just change that last amount of data to the to account, to who we're transferring it to mine, and then just actively do that, and then all these things could potentially go wrong, and now money's being stolen out of your bank account. The mitigation for this is that data in motion should always be encrypted. Within networks, data should be encrypted. Now, the only thing is I know that this is how you become like things like PCI and SOC 2 compliant and stuff. Some data isn't encrypted, it depends on the valuableness of data. This is going to be a big gray area on the sniffing one. But if your data is encrypted, then you completely stop this attack because they can't sniff it, unless they figure out man-in-the-middle attacks. And I didn't even cover those this one because, again, there's so much stuff to talk about. Spoofing, pretending to be a legitimate entity. You could be an IP address. You could be ARP spoofing to pretend like you're a computer. Could be spoofing a DNS server so you get redirected to a malicious thing. IP addresses are easily spoofed. So authorization by IP is very strongly discouraged. It's very easy to pretend to be somebody else's IP. Again, the foundations in which we built the internet didn't really provide us a mechanism to stop this. So spoofing and pretending to be someone else is a relatively big problem and concern. So mitigation for this is always require authentication at any level. Like, you should always require it. Don't just trust something because it comes from a specific ID. You should build a zero trust network. You should packet filter. If someone is spoofing or there are malformed packets coming in, maybe your packet filtering device might know that that shouldn't be a source address. Like, it should only be coming from these things. Maybe there's something fishy in the packet. It can remove it. And then encrypt. If you can prevent, again, if you encrypt your data as it's being transmitted, they can't spoof it because they'd be sending bad packets. Unless they had a way of unencrypting the data, they could not modify the packet and pretend to be somebody else. And then the last one that we're going to talk about today in this section is denial of service. The attacker is basically preventing you from using your resources. Network bandwidth, system resources such as CPU, memory, application resources such as your web server, DNS server, any sort of resource they could basically try to prevent you from using. Network bandwidth is the big one. They basically will try to congest your bandwidth because it's a lot harder to change. And CPU, like trying to use something that utilizes CPU, that drains CPU, is possible. I once saw an attack where someone knew of a flaw in one of the image rendering libraries in the server, or I think it was like a font rendering one or something like it. It rendered images weirdly. So what they did is they just kept constantly hitting that and sending things that they knew would be too big that would redline the CPU and essentially take down the web service. A typical attack is basically the attacker will flood, but a typical network-based attack is the attacker will flood the network with requests with an invalid return address. Because if you're like, well, if I'm sending all these requests, won't I be getting them back? Well, if you put an invalid return address that doesn't go anywhere, the server will still respond to them, but it's not going to come back to me. So I will be slowed down in no way, shape whatsoever, but I will, somebody else will get that thing. And that's actually what's known as a reflection attack, is putting down an invalid return address that's actually somebody that you want to attack. So you could potentially do two, where you flood somebody with a whole bunch of sins and then they're going to hit somebody else and respond to it. Or one of the big ones is DNS reflection attacks, where you basically send the request for the DNS, like, hey, who has this? And then it sends back, but instead you send it to someone else and you reflect out and you attack somebody else. You basically flood somebody's network with DNS responses that they didn't ask for, but they still have to get them. It's a pretty interesting one. There are ping-based attacks, SYN attacks, DNS reflection, all of those. And then a lot of people, denial of service is abbreviated DOS. Then there's distributed denial of service, which is basically what happens whenever you, instead of having one machine, like maybe like a data center or a server that's like attacking someone and flooding it, you now have a whole bunch of machines. You have basically a botnet, a whole bunch of personal computers all doing it. Now it has become distributed, a lot harder to ban. I used to work in a university as a student worker, and like every now and then I got to go into the data centers and work on some of the stuff in the computer science department that was in there. But data centers, like universities and stuff, are always very largely under attack because they have such large bandwidth pipes. I think like back in 2013, they had like multiple 10 gig pipes, and they have all these servers and these machines that can pump out the packets and flood something. So, if that kind of thing happened and I was being attacked by that one system, well, I know that Texas State University, which is the university I went to, I know what their IP suffix is. I can just block them or have Cloudflare block them for me, and then that fixes it. But when it's distributed and there's all these little botnets and like it's coming from all over the world, it's a lot harder to stop that. I know it is possible because Cloudflare has a whole business based around it, and they do a lot smarter things than I could ever think of. But yeah, distributed denial of service, really, really sticky situation. Mitigations of denial of service attacks are essentially firewall and operating system rules to stop these things. Contact upstream providers like their ISP, say, hey, this person's attacking me. Can you like help me with that? That does happen. And just purchase services from things like Cloudflare. Next slide, common practices. So these are going to be some practices that are good for you to incorporate into your job, into your workspace. And it's just going to be like a rapid fire. I'm going to just have a lot of different things to talk about. So the first one is, and this is actually primary foundational computer security theory, is that security happens in layers. There is no one tool to keep them all away. There's not one ring to rule them all. You can't just set up a firewall and go, woo, secure. You can't just set up an intrusion detection system and go, woo. Security works best when it works in layers. There are firewalls, there's intrusion detection systems, there's port monitoring, integrity checks, so much different things that you can use for this. And you have to do it in layers. If I, let's just do an example of, actually, yeah, 1 second. So all of these are necessary to prevent compromise. Like you can't, like, sure, firewalls may keep out some, but it won't keep out everybody. But then they get caught at the next layer. It's kind of like a Castle Defenders kind of game. Plants vs. Zombies kind of thing, which is just a rehash of a Castle Defender game. A bad actor may bypass one and get stuck or detected on another. An example is, say somehow my server is compromised and botnet software is installed on it. And I have firewall rules that keep people from coming in, but I don't have firewall rules on what outbound data transfer is allowed, which is actually not like that's one of the things a lot of people forget is we should be monitoring what's coming in, but we should also not be letting traffic out that we did not approve of. Now with web servers and stuff, because it happens on so many different ports, that is somewhat difficult. You can still do it on a range. So example, say I get a botnet installed and I'm gonna go and I'm gonna connect to another server. I'm installed in the software and now I have to phone home. That's what a botnet does. It phones home and gets basically commands from the top server, from the boss server. And then what we would do is it would dial out across, say, port 8080. If I allow outbound traffic on port 8080 out of my system, I have no way of knowing that this happened. If I had actually had a firewall rule there that said, hey, no outbound traffic on this port because none of my services run on this, there's no reason for it, the botnet attack dies right there. It's over. So the botnet is installed on your system. Your system is technically compromised, but it's a malicious, or sorry, it's a benign compromise because nothing's happened. It was not able to phone home. The botnet's going to sit there and spin its wheels and not do anything. Now you may, as another system may see like, hey, why is there all these ports being opened up? Is there something going on with the CPU? What's going on? And then you find it. But at the end of the day, while an attack happened, it did not complete, so you were not fully compromised. Now, whereas say we didn't have this firewall, but that was our only thing, you're compromised. The botnet phoned home, you didn't block, okay. But maybe you have an intrusion detection system or a port monitoring system, that's one. And your port monitoring system goes, hey, server X over here is now communicating across this medium like we don't normally do that. You should go check on that. And now you've detected it. So now, because I may have made a mistake in configuring my firewall or just decided not to do it, the second layer of defense kicked in and it caught it. And then, if that botnet were to give someone like, download another script and add root access if the port monitoring didn't get it, and now that there's someone that elevated up and you're like, hey, nobody should be elevated, then your intrusion detection system kicks in. And if they go in and they may be modifying files that shouldn't be modified, and you have integrity checks being running on the shots, like, okay, all of these layers stop the attack at different levels, and that's very valuable, and that gives you a little bit of leeway. I'm not going to say it's bad to make mistakes on security software, but it happens. We all make mistakes. So having the different layers protects you at so many different realms, and it really does. As you can see in that example, so much stuff. We were able to capture the different layers of involvement based on the different layers. So that's a very valuable thing to have. Then one of the next common practices. Sorry, my brain just left me for a second. One of the the next common practices is least privilege. Only those who need administrator access should get it. If your CEO, who is not a technical CEO, comes up and asks for root privileges on the server, politely tell him no. He does not need it. They do not need access to production systems. I do not believe our CEO has access to our production systems. He has no need for it. Don't just give everybody the keys to the kingdom because they ask for it. It's a bad idea. All resources, tools, data should be behind some form of authentication and authorization, preferably with two-factor authentication, which is the next slide. Unless you need access to a resource, you don't get it. Just because I'm like an SRE or something and I manage a certain part of it, if I don't need root access to the database, if all I need to do is read from the database, I don't need root access to it. I need a read-only account. Least privilege. Give people as little as you can and let them work with it. However, as a former SRE, you can take this too far and you can not give people the access they need, and then you make it impossible for them to do their job. I've been on that line. always make it a conversation. Don't just, no soup for you, deny. No root for you. I would love to make that meme when I'm done. Deny stuff, because if you don't give people the access to things they need to actively do their job, engineers will find a way around stuff. You will find this, like in your career, we will find a way to do the job that you pay us to do, but we may write some really crappy software in the process of trying to get around it. It is sometimes easier to just give us the access we need rather than just deny us everything. So it's a push and pull, and then I would say definitely just don't SSH as root. But I have things I need to do this quick thing. No, you don't. Log in as yourself and sudo in so there's an auditable trail, or sudo and then only use sudo on the command that you need to do. I have this bash for loop that runs commands. Okay, fine. Make it use sudo or use a configuration management tool. Or use sudo. Just do it. Don't SSH in as root. It's bad. It's bad practice. Leaving root open is bad, 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 bad. Once you're root, you have everything. So you're like, well, if I have these keys and I can SSH in as this person with the key, then I know that I logged in. Yeah, as long as you're syncing the logs off to an external log server so I can see. But if you just log SSH in as root, what's stop you to go delete the log that says you SSH in as root? Nothing's stopping that. So just don't do it. It's a pet peeve of mine. It's a big pet peeve of mine. Password policies. There has never been a more, well, actually all of the XKCD comics are immensely valuable. I love them with all of my heart. There has never been something better than password policies than this XKCD comic, which essentially states that over the last 20 years, we have successfully trained everyone to use passwords that are really hard for humans to guess by requiring leak code and special symbols and all of this stuff. But it makes it really easy for computers to guess. One of the other ones that comes up is rotating password policies. I personally am very much against rotating password policies. I have very strong passwords that are very long and very difficult to memorize, but I do it. If I have to change that password every 90 days, you're not going to get a strong password from me. You're going to get last password increment number at the end. And I know there's some people on this call who do exactly that, and you're feeling a little called out. Hey, I've done it too, no problem. Password policies undermine the strength of passwords. Strong passwords are hard to come up with, and making people change them every day is how you get password 1, password 2, password 3, and it just cycles. It's a bad one. Password policies that enforce length, number of special characters, and capitalization actually weaken security. So just a quick poll of people here, and you don't have to answer, but how many people have a password that is a word? The first letter, because we require an uppercase letter, the first letter is capitalized. But now that it requires a number, the last letters their last 1 to however many digits are the last characters in it are digits. And because it requires a special symbol, it's got an exclamation mark at the end or a symbol at the end. I would imagine that there's a lot of people that have passwords like that. I know there are because I see the statistics on how people crack passwords. There's a really cool paper. If I can find it, I'll try to put it in the tech talk about it. By enforcing that, like an arbitrary length and a certain number of characters, it is weakening the passwords. It's making it really difficult for people to remember their passwords, and people are not good at creating, like in this first panel up here, this troubadour @3. People are really bad at that, and it's relatively easy to guess because it's a short password. Really and truly, what makes passwords secure is the length of the password. So correct horse battery staple for completely random words, which I guarantee you is on a common password list, so don't use it. Is way longer, and as you can see, takes 550 years to guess versus the troubadour one takes roughly 3 days to guess at 1,000 guesses a second. It's really difficult to remember the troubadour one, but it's simple to remember correct horse battery staple because it's kind of funny and it sticks in your brain. So whenever you enforce a password length, well, I think everybody should enforce at least a password length, but I think it should be 16 characters minimum. Do not enforce a password maximum. Bad. Boo. Because once you do that, if you're going to brute force these kind of passwords, if I know exactly the length is, you've now limited it. If I know, like, okay, you can use special characters, but you can only use these special characters. Well, that really stinks because now I know exactly how many characters to guess. 26 lowercase characters, 26 uppercase characters. We're going to go with the English alphabet here. 52, we're going to go 10 digits, 62. We'll add space 63. And now if I only allow you 5, 6, 7 of them, and I tell you which ones it is, now I know the list, and it's still very difficult, but it's doable. But if your passwords are all really short, it's a lot easier. So let people make long passwords. And like if I was to do a correct horse battery staple, I would replace 1 character there with elites. I would with a number, one of them. I don't use special character, maybe 1 special character if I have to. Because it's still very easy to remember. I can usually remember where I put that that letter or that special character or that number, and then boom, you're good. And you don't have to worry about it, and it's still funny, it's still easy to remember. It's long, and it breaks a dictionary and a rainbow attack because it's not just like dictionary words. There's a little bit of leet code in there. Okay, password managers like Bitwarden, LastPass, OnePass, they're good. I like them. Personally, as someone who centralization is a problem sometimes in computing systems, that's a single point of failure. They get in, they have everything. I personally don't use them. I just keep them up here. That's me. You are more likely to have a user leave a sticky note or use a weak password than someone brute forcing your password though. At the end, like we said in the social engineering slide, people are the problem. People will use a weak password, then you have to worry about brute force. So try to enforce password policy rules that don't let them make weak passwords, at least 16 characters. Like that helps. I know that people would revolt, but we did a really good job of training people to make really bad passwords. And as always, and you'll see this, passwords are the weakest, or people are the weakest link in the password policy. People are always the weakest link in the security policy. Altogether, all of this stuff can be rendered completely moot by a person with a bad password or a person with a grudge. So just be aware of that. So use HTTPS. SSL and TLS are used to ensure that data from your web server isn't encrypted and can't be read by outside sources. Sniffing attack, like we mentioned. This is getting worse and worse because ISPs are becoming more and more notorious for selling user data and creating profiles on you and stuff. So you need to secure this. This is not just about protecting password things. This is about protecting your users, protecting the people. Even if you have a site that nobody logs into and it's a blog site, it'd still be behind HTTPS. You have to protect your users. Google actively warns people away from non-HTTPS sites. You're deprioritized in search. Certain browsers warn against insecure sites. All modern web browsers scream very loudly now whenever you try to go to an insecure site. And if you're trying to like sell people or something, you're trying to create a business, that's not a reassuring thing for your users to see. It has never been easier to secure a website. I remember when Certbot, when Let's Encrypt came out, before they changed the name to Certbot, and you had to pay like $150 for a certificate a year, and it was not an easy process to do. Certbot has automated all of this. There are many other services that offer managed SSL, like DigitalOcean load balancers will renew your certificate for you. So you don't even have to manage anymore, and you can do SSL termination. And if you're within that VPC, you can transmit the data, it terminates and then decrypts it and sends it all decrypted across that network. I know that we had originally mentioned that's kind of a bad thing, but again, that's one of those trade-offs you take where if it is a secure network, in theory, you can trust it. But again, if you're doing credit cards, it's not gonna be Alexa, it's not gonna be PCI compliant. Make sure all of your content comes from secure sources. This is a big one that I'm going to be doing another video on soon. If you use images or CDNs, like for like getting a JavaScript library or using an image, and it's not secure, it's going to say that your site's partially insecure, and that little lock is going to be red, and people are going to know it. So make sure that all of it comes, all of the data that's being pulled in from external sites, CSS, JavaScript, images, is using HTTPS. If not, it will scream. It's really not terrible of a thing. It's not nice, it's not good, but it will make people really it'll make people question the security of your site, and you get that angry icon, and nobody likes that angry icon. Securing SSH, another good one. Always use key-based authentication. Ensure that you're using strong keys like ECDSA, ED25519. If you're using RSA, make sure you're using at least 4096 bits of entropy, because RSA gets weaker and weaker by the year. I actually, in my graduate cybersecurity course, we actually had a project where we cracked weak RSA keys. So just know that while it is still secure at large bit lengths, it's its own thing. So secure something with something like fail2ban to keep out those pesky bots. You may find yourself being constantly attacked by the same IP. Ban them, get rid of them, you don't need them. Use two-factor authentication and PAM, so you can use Google Authenticator to actually log in. Yes, this is really a thing, and there's a tutorial on DigitalOcean's website explaining exactly how to do this. I'm going to do a video on it again soon. I'm going to do a securing SSH webinar where I'm going to do this in a live coding session, so tune in for that. It's fun, I like it, it's a cool one to use. Multi-factor authentication. At the end of the day, this is what, if you take nothing from this talk at all, if you've been ignoring me with your fingers in your ears, to each his own, this is the one thing I want you to pay attention to. Multi-factor authentication is the most important thing you can do to secure yourself right now. And essentially what it is identity can be determined by one or more of the following things. Something you know, something you are, and something you have. This is how we built identity systems. So something you know is relatively simple. This is a password and a passphrase. This is what we've been using forever. We've always been doing this. Something that you are, biometric scans, fingerprint, facial scans, retina scans, these kind of things. There might be like handprints, knuckle scans. I've done a knuckle scan for like Proctor Track and stuff, all weird stuff. It verifies something that you are, and then there's something that you have, which is a YubiKey, a rotating password like Google Auth or an RSA token, something like that. You need to be using at least one of these. Most people are only using something that you know. Most sites offer multi-factor authentication. Personally, I go with something you know and something you have. Something you are, such as biometric scans, as we're going to see in the next slide, I'm going to talk about that. But use Okta, use Google Auth, use the RSA token. Duo is another one that you can use that sends push notifications for allowing things. Your Google accounts, if you have an Android phone, does it on there. Always use at least two-factor auth on everything you can. So another one that we're going to talk about that I didn't put a bullet in here, but I'm running a little bit late, but we're going to talk about it really quickly. When it comes to something you have, if you have to use text-based authentication, that's my least favorite of the something you have. Why? Because SIM jacking is a thing where people call your phone provider, pretend to be you. They use those security questions that you set, that you so conveniently posted on Facebook, to pretend to be you, get yourself back in, reset your account, and steal your SIM. And then what they do is they take your SIM, they activate it on your phone, and then they log into your thing with the password that they stole, because again, they reset your password using those how well do you know me questions you put on Facebook. And then now they have that, now they have your phone. When the multi-factor comes up, they have your phone, they get the text, they have the code, now they're in. SIM jacking has happened to actually a few of my friends. It's a really serious thing. If you can do SIM two-factor auth over a voice over IP system like Google Hangouts, that allows you to, there's no SIM, but then they have to log in with that they have to log into the two-factor authentication to get in to the Google Voice so they can see the two-factor authentication. It's a little bit more secure. That's personally what I do. However, I do really believe I'm in a chicken and egg situation where one day I'm going to lock myself out of everything, and I'm still trying to figure out how to solve that, because I have to log into my phone to get my two-factor auth. It's a weird. So the main thing for there is trust SMS two-factor auth. If it's the only option you have, use it, but I would use rotating password before I use SMS. Biometric authentication. So you may be wondering, why are you talking about the fingerprint scanner or the facial recognition scanner? These are something that you are. These are getting better, but they can still be fooled. And like whenever I originally studied computer security back in like 2013, 2014, people it actively said in my textbook that they're decent, but they can still very easily be fooled. Someone could take my phone and just like put it up to my face. Like if I were to get arrested for something and the cops were demanding access to my phone and all they had was a password on here, they couldn't get in. But if I was using facial recognition, all they have to do is just hold it to my face, and now my phone lets them in. Same thing with fingerprint scanners. So biometric scanners can be fooled. I mean, if you look back from the very beginning, like if you look back in the early 2010s and stuff, when they were like incorporated on like Windows laptops and stuff, and people were like holding up pictures and fooling them, they were easily fooled. They're a lot better now, but still I'd be weary of them. They're a good option. I don't trust them because again, if it's my phone and I don't want someone being able to open my phone, like I could be asleep and something and someone, I mean, again, I'm pretending like I'm Secret Agent Man or something. There's a great XKCD comic about this too, where they talk about password, how you think it's going to go down. It's like, well, we've brute force to do this, blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, no. It's like, no, if I hit him with this wrench hard enough, eventually he'll tell me the password. That's exactly what kind of happens when it comes to these kind of things. Secret Agent Man style and stuff. Long story short, biometric auth, I'm not a fan of because it's still too easy. It's easy to steal my face. It's easy to steal my fingerprint if I'm in the proximity. Whereas if it's in my brain and it requires another code, that's a lot harder to steal. So I went a little bit long. I hope nobody minds. That's all for this time. Be sure to look up more DigitalOcean webinars and workshops just like this one. Tune in every last Thursday of the month to watch more of my webinars. If you like my presentation style, if you like seeing me do live coding, which we're going to get back to next webinar. I'm every last Thursday of the month. My next webinar is going to be on securing your droplet, which will be on August 27th. Feel free to go to that link to go ahead and register for it. We're going to talk about, I just split up a droplet, now what do I do? And then try out DigitalOcean for free if you've never used this before and you're getting a new account, $100 free credit for 60 days doing the do.co/Mason. And I want to thank everyone for attending. I'm going to go back to this slide just so if you do want to do this, register for the secure droplet one, you can go ahead and do so. That is all I have for this time. And I'm going to turn it over to my moderator. Yeah.
Thank you, Mason. We see there are a lot of security history buffs and experts in the audience today. Thanks for your questions, comments, and recommendations. Mason, are you okay to go like a few minutes over perhaps so we can answer some
time in the world. And for all of you security buffs, like I had to read this, and if I messed up, I apologize. Like I did my best, but there's a lot of research out there.
Yeah, and they have been posting a bunch of them in the chat itself. So Mason will see them after this, and I'm sure he'll respond to them in the Tech Talk page at a later date as well. So first question, you didn't talk about preventing DDoS, botnets, and DDNS. Aren't there attack forces for hire?
Yes, there are all sorts of different. Okay, so for the preventing thing, talking about it, that is actually going to come in later at another webinar. I'm actually going to try to do that. That's one of the ones I'm a little bit more rusty on, but I could at least probably demonstrate a botnet. As for attack force fire, yes, there are. You can easily hire someone to. You can go onto the dark web and ask someone to have a botnet and attack somebody's business. As for preventing that, really and truly, it is difficult. But things like Cloudflare and just good packet filtering. I'm not going to claim to be an expert on this. I'm going to have to do a lot of research before I do that next presentation. But yeah, DDoS attacks, there are people that you can do that for, but there's also people you can hire to protect you, such as Cloudflare.
Great. With sniffing, where the attacker is analyzing the network data stream, is SSL enough for the encryption?
So SSL and TLS, if your data is encrypted and they don't have the keys, like they don't have the private keys, then yes. If they're in your network and they're just sniffing and all they're seeing is encrypted data, then nothing can happen. However, if they compromise one of the servers that has the certificate on it and they have the certificate, then they could, in theory, perform a man-in-the-middle attack where they could decrypt the traffic, read the traffic, and then re-encrypt it and send it back through. That's a multi-level, multifaceted level of attack, and a lot more difficult to pull off. But if you're just someone on the network, like if you go into a public Starbucks and you're sitting there and you open up Wireshark and you listen to the traffic, if the traffic is encrypted, you'll see that you cannot easily sniff. But if the data is not encrypted, you'll be able to see everything that happens as it goes through.
Great. I think this following question is going to involve like a whole other talk perhaps, but maybe you could touch on it very quickly. Are there specific organizations, frameworks, or risk rating methodologies that you'd recommend we follow for security best practices when developing web applications? So this user recommended the OWASP, which is the Open Web Application Security Project, as one of them. Any others?
Okay. Okay. So I'm gonna write that down. So we're gonna actually we have these questions saved.
I have it down for you, Mason. Don't worry.
Okay.
We'll answer this question at a later date.
Okay. Well, I'll just say OWASP is a good one. There's government level ones like FIPS and stuff that you can use. As for security frameworks for testing, there's things like Metasploit and stuff. Yes, those are two separate talks that I will totally put down as in my list of ideas of talks that I should give for this. And see those coming. I would have to do a little bit more research. I've heard of OWASP, and I implemented a FIPS because when I worked at cybersecurity, I worked for government cybersecurity, so it was a lot of government. So FIPS, there's PCI compliance, which is the credit card one, but while it is a little bit strict, I mean, and it's for secure credit card systems, it also secures systems. There's SOC 2 compliance, which is very valuable as well, which you can use these kind of benchmarks to test. FIPS is actually a benchmarking suite that you can use. I remember doing that. That was a long like 3 months of like writing test suites for that. So yeah, I will totally do talks over those. Thank you for the suggestion. I really appreciate it.
Cool. Which app do you recommend for two-factor authentication, Authy or Google Authenticator?
Okay, so I've never tried Authy. I've had friends recommend to me Authy. I had a relatively scary moment a couple weeks ago where my battery on my phone decided it wasn't going to charge anymore, and the only way that they were going to repair it was to wipe it. So I was in a mad dash to save my backup codes before my phone died, because then I'd be locked out of everything. At that point in time, someone recommended to me Authy because you could have the codes in multiple places, which does it undoubtedly weaken the security by having it. However, physical location security is, at least in my apartment, is okay. However, at that time, I found out that you can duplicate your Google Authenticator codes to multiple devices now. That's a feature that they added. So I use Google Authenticator. If that feature had not been available, I was planning to switch to Authy, but they saved my business by, or saved me using the app by having that. So I use Google Authenticator. I don't know a lot about Authy, but I can totally do another talk on two-factor authentication. I could do a whole talk on two-factor authentication. So and like just showing how it's implemented. So yeah, I would recommend Google Authenticator because that's what I use. But we'll put it down as the thing I'm going to talk about.
Sounds good. Is using VPCs sufficient to negate network-based attacks on the intra-cluster level?
For the most part, yeah. As long as your VPC is not compromised, yes. So VPC creates a private network, and as long as you ensure that your droplets are not speaking out on the public network. So what I did, and I think I did this in my last tech talk, is I did a sample architecture. What I do when I set up my droplets inside of a VPC is I have all outbound firewall rules are completely disallowed from droplets. So my droplets cannot access the public internet on their public interfaces by me setting a firewall rule that explicitly says no. I then use the firewall rules to set interconnectivity between droplets using the private IP spaces. And then inside of there, that would prevent almost all of your sniffing attacks because it's happening in a private IP space. As long as you don't get compromised. If one of those machines in there gets compromised and starts sniffing, then if you are sending all your data there through unencrypted traffic, then it can see all of that. So the short answer is yes, as long as you're not already compromised in the first place, which most of the time I would say you're probably not. So.
All right, one last question in the interest of time. Are plug-and-play open source solutions sufficient to block most attacks? Do small shops need to actively monitor traffic or tools, or would it be quite okay? So some of the plug-and-play open source solutions examples would be like OSSEC or Suricata.
I've never actually heard of those off the top of my head. The ones that I know of that are like Splunk and Snort are very valuable. Like Splunk is a logging system. So like there's a lot of really cool security stuff you can do with Splunk. Snort is an intrusion detection system that you can not only implement, like bring in open modules and use, but you can also implement your own. Typically the open source ones are good. There are a lot of private ones that do all right. I used to work for ForcePoint, which sells this kind of products. And they were okay. They just, for small shops, it's not feasible because like the entry point on that was like $60,000 for an appliance. They may have changed their pricing now. But a lot of people run on the open source stuff because again, you can see exactly what it's doing. Because the source code is open, that means that security experts have vetted it and they know there's nothing sneaky going on behind the fact. Whereas with private security firms and stuff, where it's all kind of a black box and you don't know what's happening, you trust that they're doing what they're saying they're doing, but do you actually know? Without seeing the source code, you really don't. You have to take you have to take it at their word. So I trust the open source ones. Fail to ban has been one that I've used my entire career, and it's very valuable. And that's just a small one. But again, all these things happen in layers, so there's going to be multiple tools. But I would definitely recommend having an intrusion detection system monitoring, something in all shops. If you're making money and if you're planning on this being like a big business or something, like it's a business, this is your livelihood, I like take all necessary steps to protect yourself. That's always going to be my recommendation.
Thanks so much, Mason. Any parting thoughts or words of wisdom for our audience before we sign off today?
Not today. Always, I guess the last thing is always remember that you can have the best security in the world, but people are the weakest link. They're the weakest point. Like the social engineering a person or getting a person to flip is always going to be the most difficult thing you're going to face. So just be wary of that and try to set good policy that encourages good security practices from the people that you trust and from the people that are working with you, like two-factor auth. And that is it.
Awesome. Thank you everyone for joining, and we hope to see you again soon. Have a great week, and tell us how we did on this talk and what other talks you'd like to hear more about. We got some great suggestions already. When you close this talk, you'll get a little screen that pops up. Tell us more there. Thanks everyone. Bye.